Thank you, Ms. Greenbaum. Thank you, chamber players. It's okay to clap, people. Thank you for invoking the sublime this afternoon. I'm Vince Durnan. I am still the director here at University School, lo these many years. And I was one of Debbie's students too. It was the rare day she could resist the opportunity to stop in my office as she passed by in the hallway. And as we reflect on it, it was generally like 30% small talk, 20% encouragement, and 50% ideas on how I could improve, for which I am still grateful. We form a quorum of sorts here by gathering, and our hearts are doubly heavy today. And with your help, I'm going to start with just a moment of silence. Kay Simmons, my predecessor, who served as interim director here in 1990-91, passed away just this weekend after enduring just the worst of medical challenges. And as we gather to honor and celebrate Debbie, let's also think about Kay. Thank you. So I want a word about these. The protocol will be when you're behind the mic, you can take your mask off. Otherwise, we are continuing to set the standard, the all too elusive standard in the volunteer state of COVID mitigation measures. And so I appreciate everybody pitching in on that front. But that's why I'm not wearing this otherwise really fetching garnet mask that I will wear as soon as I sit down again. So we're honored you've chosen to join us here today, whether in this room or parts unknown. My sense is that this message is carrying almost globally, given the reach of Debbie's career. Also honored that the Davies family gave us this opportunity. It's an important day for us as a school, for us as a community, for us as fellow educators. And yes, I am dressed up a little bit. As a reminder to myself of how significant this day is for the school. I would also, as a footnote, like to continue thanking David Ewing, class of 1985, for a tie that's well beyond my capacity to find beautiful ties. He gave it to me on a day when I was wearing a particularly unattractive tie. He took it right off, handed it to me, and he said, "You need this far more than I do." And today I continue to see the truth in what he said. So I'm dressed up, but I don't want that to stand in the way of today feeling very familiar and celebratory. Because after all, that's what this beautiful program says. That's been the idea all along. So I'm glad you came as you are. Mostly, I'm just glad you're here. And we're meeting in the very center of the school, this unchanging element of our school culture. We're here in the auditorium. This place that's a constant for us. Whenever something really important is going to happen, we come here. Right? So I'm glad to be back in the auditorium. And in reflecting on this increasingly ancient space, I wonder what it was like the first day Debbie walked in. And if you would walk with me, please, to Dateline July 1977, when Debbie Guatkin Davies submitted her application, which I hold in my hand, to University School, complete with the required picture. None of this would pass HR scrutiny right now. And above, at the top lines, not only did she need to list her name, her address, her unchanged to this day address, underneath it, for reasons unknown, she was asked her age, her height, which didn't take long to fill in, mysteriously her weight, I'd like to reassure everyone we no longer do this. Her social security number for all to see, her marital status, number of children. You guys both made the count, and her educational background. You'll remember Debbie was a daughter of the Nutmeg State, the land of steady habits, also known as Connecticut. And she documented her high school diploma from I guess it was Staples in Glastonbury up there, and then off to Goucher, which was at that point an all-women's school. A conversation I never had with her, like wondering what that meant and what led to that decision, and then more predictably, her MAT at Wesleyan. And you'll hear more about that in a little bit. But what I want to call your attention to as we start is this paragraph on the back where they say, state as briefly as possible, which again, kind of presumptuous, state as briefly as possible what you believe to be your philosophy of education. And tell me if this doesn't sound familiar. I believe education is a process in which a student hopefully learns who he or she is and how he or she functions physically, emotionally. Develop interests and a lifelong desire to learn and explore our world. Basic academic material content. I feel a teacher's job is to encourage the student to move forward in this process and to broaden his or her knowledge and interests. So I would say check, check, and check. She set a remarkable example for us here. And just kind of fun facts from the massive personnel file that is now going to be part of our archives. This application also recorded her prior employment as a computer programmer in Florida. Some of you know that. No kidding around, you probably know she's a Woodrow Wilson Fellow, Institute on High School Math. She's a recipient of the Presidential Award for Excellence in Science and Math Teaching. Like, no modest achievement. My personal favorite from 1988, I could absolutely picture this happening to me. She returned an honorarium that was assigned to her as a cooperating teacher at Vanderbilt. And she instructed that it be given to another USN faculty member instead. Vanderbilt subsequently denied the request, and upon hearing that news, Debbie marched into Harvey Sperling's office to, and this is a direct quote, make a squawk about it. And she specifically instructed Harvey to whom he should go and exactly what to say. In that same year, 1988, she was applying to go to Phillips Exeter for a conference on secondary school mathematics and computers. And Debbie wrote of her desire to learn more about software and teaching materials, saying, unlike my 1970s math teachers who said, put those calculators away, what will you do when people don't know how to use slide rules? No, Debbie did not say that. Debbie on her application said, clearly the computer is here to stay. It's our responsibility to determine the best way to incorporate its use into the mathematics curriculum. There were boatloads of letters of thanks from family members for whom Debbie made a huge difference. And I am one of those family members. I distinctly remember very early on sitting in a back-to-school night session, and she turned mostly to the dads in the room and said, do not tell your daughters that you were bad at calculus, no matter how true that may be. So that's your problem. Like, your daughters are just fine, okay? And let me teach. And of course, she was completely right on that. On the citation for her award in 2004 is for lifetime service and excellence as a teacher in the state of Tennessee. So she was recognized by our state independent school association. I had a chance to write this in May of 2004, and I'll conclude with this. She continues to set an intellectual tone that models our best hope for teachers, even as she makes time to understand every student and to serve as a voice for unflinchingly high standards in our wider faculty conversations. It's not an overstatement to suggest that USN wouldn't be the school it is without Debbie Davis. She's one of those people who bent the arc of our history. And I'm honored to be standing here today, having learned from her, and I'm delighted that you're going to have a chance to hear from colleagues, a particular former student, and then ultimately from her sons who were so kind to share her with us. So welcome, welcome, and we'll just proceed as the program indicates. Her successor as math chair, Cindy Crenshaw, is going to take the mic now. Thanks.
Okay, Vince is quite the storyteller. I am a math teacher, so you're going to have to bear with me on some of these things. So we're here today because Debbie always knew what to do, how to do what was best for the kids. That was her quote. We've always got to do what's best for the kids. Those she taught, those she raised, and those who became her colleagues and friends. About 33 years ago, Debbie took a chance on a kid who had just graduated from Vanderbilt. And also wrote a resume and a cover letter that had countless typos in it. She told me about that years after I was hired, so that was really good to know. I had been turned down for a teaching position at an independent school that I will not name. It was their mistake. I was told that I would not kind of make it as a teacher. Then I met with Debbie and Harvey Sperling at USN. We met in the new building at the time. Okay, so the new building was built in the 80s. That was when our cafeteria was on the 4th floor that at that time we called the 3rd floor because the first floor was the basement and didn't deserve a number. Also, all basketball games happened in the Cheek Gym. Little did I know I would still be teaching math, taking on her role as chair of the math department, sharing in choir practice at USN. Choir practice is happy hour. Debbie got me hooked on this place and all that came with it. If Harvey is anywhere that can hear this, I need to apologize to him. It was Debbie's passion that got me to sign a contract at this school. Harvey was great to meet, but Debbie was the one that made me decide this was the place to be. Although Harvey did say, you're not used to having a salary, so you ought to go ahead and start putting away for your retirement. Harvey understood math, too. The truth is, as some of you know, Debbie actually hired me twice. Once as a young college graduate, and after a brief stint at a nearby girls' private school, again as a young mom. During that time when I was at this other school, she checked in on me constantly. She would email, she would call, check in on how I was doing as a mom and as a teacher. Her avid support, friendship, and strength helped me grow professionally and personally. In both arenas, she continued to teach me to do what's best for the kids. That meant encouraging our children to make mistakes, take intellectual risks, and value integrity. She was a longtime member of the Judicial Board. I learned a lot from her, and so did many colleagues and children. Doing what's best for the kid also meant diving into fascinating problems with them or stepping back to watch them wrestle without her. She also made inspirational signs that told everyone spoon-feeding children only teaches them the shape of the spoon. And I write this remembering that when she put that sign up, she liked to do things for herself. So I think it was this sign. She got a ladder. She didn't ask for help. She got a ladder, and she put up the sign in the front of her classroom. She fell. She broke her ribs. But she did it because that's how Debbie did things. She did what was good for the kids and the school, regardless of what that meant in terms of her. I recently asked a kid to put a poster up in my room. It needed to go up high. I knew about Debbie. I thought, okay, Jolie Booth, can you please put this up there? She did. Steve Robbins once told me that what impressed him most about Debbie, the teacher, was as much what she did in the classroom as what she didn't do. She taught kids, both her own and other people's, about persistence, resilience, and ass power. Okay, so my father-in-law did not really understand what ass power was when I was talking to him about this. So I found this quote that he did understand. It's from Octavia Butler, and it's really Debbie's math version of this quote. You don't start out writing good stuff. You start out writing crap and thinking it's good stuff, and then gradually you get better at it. That's why I say one of the most valuable traits is persistence. Here's hoping that phrase, ass power, will be carved into the marble stone in the Edge Hill lobby next to her name someday. You could do it. I'm honored here to speak about my friend and mentor who helped me grow in so many ways. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janet Schneider, and Michael and Trevor asked that I speak about Debbie more as a friend, so I have the pleasure to do that. It was not hard to prepare. I'm here to honor Debbie by speaking about the long and deep friendship she developed at USN throughout her career until the very last few months. A former USN teacher and communications director and a dear friend to Debbie planned to be here alongside me today, but a death in her own family required her to be at another memorial service in Texas, so she regrets not being here, but she offers the following for me to read on her behalf. Over 40 years ago, a group of USN faculty members, Debbie, Janet, Beverly Bond, Kathy Lee, and Jeannie McCutcheon, and I formed the bowling club, a totally unlikely name because we didn't bowl except once, and then we didn't finish the game. But the name did embrace everything associated with it. A group of friends brought together at school to form a league, which met regularly to have fun, hone our teaching skills, and to do everything we could to make USN a winning school. We set about helping to solve problems, professional and personal ones, which were almost always intertwined. Debbie was a decade older than the rest of us single teachers. She was married and a mother, but she fit right in. We got together several times a week during lunch or dinner at one of our houses. Debbie was easily the most experienced teacher, the most mature of the group, and the gutsiest when proposing change during those early years, change around program and policy. She modeled for us how important it was to take our job seriously and to speak up for making sure we were educating students in the best possible way. She was our dear friend, our mentor, our professional role model. She helped us grow, and she helped us grow up. We young ones were in an unsettled state, as was USN. Debbie and I arrived soon after Janet when the school was having a traumatic time. After USN's young first director was fired mid-year, the faculty remained fearful and worried. Faculty meetings were riveting, as the future of the school seemed to be at stake, and it was. Connie says, I first noticed Debbie in one of those long, fraught faculty meetings. She was sitting on the Payne library floor saying what she thought. Speaking out was not a problem for her. We became good friends. Debbie made friends easily, as you all know. We loved her honesty, her courage, her insight and pursuit of excellence in teaching. It was soon apparent that she was an incredible teacher, and we sat at her feet to learn as much as we could. Conversations with Debbie and with then head of the high school, John Mason, also a math teacher, laid the foundation for most everything we all would try to do in our classrooms. The differences in our disciplines didn't matter. Debbie came to our classes so she could offer suggestions, and we visited her classroom to learn from her commitment to getting the kids to think for themselves. To quote Rick O'Hara, head of the high school following John Mason, Debbie was a teacher's teacher. Now for some of my early memories. In those early days, as Connie mentioned, our professional and social lives were one and the same. When we were socializing, the conversations always revolved around USN. And Debbie took bowling club almost as seriously as she did her teaching. She was very proud to be a member of bowling club. She made us bowling pin Christmas ornaments, handmade by Debbie, with the date 1983. We still use these every Christmas and think about her. Let's see, I've lost my spot. And proudly, she wore the bowling club lapel pins that we ordered, and she hosted many meetings at her home. Beverly Bond, then development director at USN, says about bowling club, "I remember how dedicated to bowling club gatherings Debbie was, making sure everything we did was exactly right. Once she phoned to tell me to bring a salad to her house for dinner. She was very precise and laid out in minute detail where I should get the lettuce and how to put the salad together." Other memories, in 1981, bowling club members crammed ourselves into a car and drove through North Carolina. I needed to visit colleges, and we also needed a free place to spend the night on the way. So the six of us stopped and toured Guilford College, met the representatives in admissions, spent the night in their guest dorm rooms, all in the interest of looking at Guilford College, and then headed on to Nags Head for a week of fun. I'm sure our entourage made some sort of an impact on Guilford College. The beach at Nags Head where we stayed was the place where we sat up late one night devising a questionnaire for potential boyfriends. Debbie contributed a question I'll always remember. She thought we should inquire about the way guys kept their sock drawers. She suggested that a peek into the way a man kept his sock drawer would be instructive, with excessive neatness being a red flag. She no doubt based this on Keith's sock drawer, which had passed that test with flying colors. And Debbie talked a lot about Keith, and he set somewhat of a guy standard for all of us. She also taught us about being mothers, and you can see from Michael and Trevor, they're proof that she had that curriculum right. One week during the summer, Bowling Club took a trip to Gunnersville, Alabama to stay at the lake house belonging to my husband's grandparents. All of us remember sitting at the kitchen table where there was a bowl of plastic fruit. Jeannie McCutcheon, an English teacher and director of admissions, remembers Debbie putting plastic grapes on her head and suggested that we all adorn ourselves with fruits while we discussed how to raise money for scholarships for USN students. We were clearly being silly. But out of that discussion came the idea for Run With Us, a 5-mile run in the Edge Hill area, sponsored by USN, a quite successful endeavor which lasted several years. On a more serious note, Jeannie also remembers the many times she took families on admission tours into Debbie's classroom, where she could always count on the students to be both relaxed and highly engaged in their work. In April of 1985, I was at Vanderbilt Hospital in labor with my first child, Joseph, now 36 years old. And Debbie and fellow Bowling Club member Kathy Lee showed up in my hospital room on their lunch break and out of a paper bag pulled a plunger they'd brought from USN to assist the nurse with Joseph's delivery. The nurse was not amused, and she kicked Debbie and Kathy out of the room and put a sign on the door which read, "No more visitors from USN allowed." Again in 2 years, I returned to Vanderbilt Hospital for the birth of my daughter, Eleanor. And prior to surgery, I was put in a cold and dark holding room where no one was allowed. But the wait seemed endless, and I was worried about Joseph, who was also in the hospital at that same time. Lonely, I heard a door open, and here's Debbie peeking around the door. She'd figured out where I was and made her way through a maze of off-limit hallways. To this day, I cannot figure out how she found me. It must have been mathematical. I'll never forget her impish grin and how glad I was to see her face at that moment. She kept me company for the longest time until they came for me. That was the kind of friend Debbie was. Always there and brave in her efforts to support. She had the ability to empathize, and she acted. She had ass power, never thinking about whether she should or shouldn't. She just did. Bowling Club never officially ended. We've had reunions now and then, but its formal existence changed our lives. Debbie and I were the 2 Bowling Club members who stayed at USN without interruption until recently. Up until the very end, I continued to seek her advice, knowing she would carefully consider whatever issue, professional or personal, I brought her. Sometimes she would need time to think, but she'd always circle back around and say, "Jan, I've been thinking about what we were talking about," or "I've been thinking of you," and she'd offered her latest ideas. I knew I could always count on her to give me her best suggestions, and she always added the humor and flowers from her garden to help me lighten up. She would often stop by my office and say, "Hey, Jan, want to hear something hilarious?" and proceed to brighten my day with something she'd seen or heard in the classroom or in the halls. Debbie had many friends from those early days besides those of us in Bowling Club, and once she was a friend, it was for life. Ann Teef, an iconic UN history teacher who left USN to become head of a school in Maryland and eventually back to Nashville to lead Harpeth Hall, adored Debbie. She says, "In my professional path, there was no one more supportive of me than Debbie. We remained close friends and stayed in touch well after my time at USN." And Rich Perry, then high school counselor, says, "Debbie called me often, though I was miles away in Massachusetts and had been gone from USN for 30 years. I loved talking to her because there was never pretentiousness. She was interested in me and my life, and I always felt better after talking to her." We still talked about teaching. She was always attuned to students and what they needed to learn, both academically and emotionally. She used tough love, stayed consistent, and had amazing success. Claudia Thompson Hazelwood remembers her as a great listener who always responded thoughtfully and earnestly. Over the years, I've watched Debbie continue to offer guidance and friendship to new teachers, young teachers, all teachers, and her love and concern for USN and students never wavered. No matter how sick she was always youthful, playful, interested in all that was going on in the life of this school. She never complained, and when I wanted a rundown of her health issues, she changed the subject, either to my children or to USN. I've never really seen anyone who was so ill and who didn't complain or want to talk about themselves. She was still teaching me as she neared the end of her life. All of us, old and new teachers alike, are so grateful to Debbie for teaching us to teach students how to go beyond the surface, to think and reason, to think creatively, and to nurture them emotionally. And all the time, she was an excellent and loyal friend. On all fronts, she made USN a better and more enjoyable school every single day.
My condolences to Michael and Trevor and the entire family of Debbie. Thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Gideon Yu, and I'm a former student of many of you in the audience, and it's great to see all you guys, and of Debbie, and a lifelong good buddy of Debbie's. I promised myself that I wouldn't cry today. On cue. On cue. So I'm going to try to bring some jokes and some laughter. I brought some slides, and please know that it's to mask how sad I am. Sorry. Okay. When I gave a eulogy a long time ago for my grandmother, and the pastor actually gave me some great advice. He said that public speaking is already really, really freaking hard. So if you're giving a eulogy, it makes it 10 times harder because emotions cause random reactions in public speaking. So I completely wrote out my speech. So if I start crying and I start reading, don't blame me for being a bad public speaker. Okay, so last week I was at a golf tournament. And I sat next to the most fabulous 80-year-old veteran, okay? I sat down, and he looks at me, and he says, I'm Greg, but you can call me Roach. And so I looked at him, and I'm like, okay, I'll bite. Why Roach? And he said, and I quote, because I'm 80 years old, served multiple tours of duty, and beat cancer 4 times. It's damn near impossible to kill me. That's why I'm the Roach. Senorita Melchior, El Cucaracha to you, my friend. So then on cue, my phone, which was on the table in front of me, buzzed, and this is what my home screen looks like, right there. Can everybody see that? And I'm not going to cry, Susie, I'm not going to cry. I'm trying my hardest. So Roach looks at my phone, looks at me, back at the phone, and he's an 80-year-old war veteran, so you can give him a break on this. He says, what's with that 80-year-old white woman on your phone? As some of you know, I take any and all opportunities to share my love of Debbie to anybody who wants to listen. And in fact, you guys are all forced to listen to me today. Apologies to those who have already heard this many times. Vince especially, you've heard this many times. My wife Susie, you've heard this many times. But here's an abbreviated version of what I told the Roach. So I had just joined this super hard high school, this school, as a freshman. And I was having an impossibly hard time keeping up. A couple of my freshman teachers are here, Kathy Lee and Grace Melchior. And the mid-quarter progress reports had just come out, and I was, it goes to all freshmen, and I was having a real tough time. And especially in Algebra 1, I was having a real hard time. I think I was getting B's or C's and everything. Inexplicably, my father, who got the newsletter, he said, you're going to sign up for the math contest. And, I'm getting a B, C in Algebra 1, so I said no, and then he forced me to go do it. And then, oh, by the way, since Debbie is obviously not here with us, I make sure to, I'm going to have her alongside of me. I won't read it. You guys can read it at your leisure. But I've seen her, whenever I give this speech, she always whispers this to the person sitting next to her. She may have told you, Sandy, a few times too. So anyway, I go to Miss Davies' office and I scribble on the door, under Algebra 1, put my name on there. And, at the time, it's so funny, at the time I thought she was a little old lady, but she's actually like way younger than I am now. But so she says, we haven't met. Who are you? And I said, I'm Gideon. Which level are you signing up for? I said, Algebra 1. And she's like, oh, you must be in Miss Lytle's class. And for those of you that don't know what that means, the accelerated algebra class that Ms. Davies taught was for 7th and 8th graders, and the 9th graders got put into the regular Algebra 1 class in Ms. Lytle's class. So not usually a source of math contest excellence was that class. And so I said to her, I said to Debbie that I have no desire to enter the math contest. I'm only doing this because my parents forced me to do it. And, okay, I'm not going to cry in this one. I'm going to read this because I need everybody to hear exactly what she said to me. This was the defining moment in all of my schooling. She said, "You aren't as bad as you think you are. I've seen you hanging around after school, waiting for your ride home from your parents. How about we make a deal? Since you're waiting around anyway, why don't you give me an hour or so, a few times a week, and I'll prepare you for the math contest." I mean, does everybody realize how crazy that is? And I said, "Well, we don't have enough money to pay you." And she's like, "Oh, no. I would never think of that." So, long story short, we did that for the next 3 years, multiple times a week, an hour or more after school. We won gobs of math contests together. More importantly, she gave me the confidence that I could be excellent at anything. I got good grades in English and Spanish because I felt confident when I was good in math. And I remember she would, sometimes I would have a really hard time, and if I made a little bit of a breakthrough with her, she'd grab me by my arm, and she would just look at me, and she would say, "You're a wizard." And you know what? I was sitting there, I'm like, I am a freaking wizard. This is great. I can do this. And it really, behind only my parents, Debbie is the single most important influence in my life and my career, including everybody. I can't possibly imagine what would have become of me if I hadn't met her. Anyway, back to Mr. Roach. He was blown away, obviously. What a great story. And we toasted Debbie multiple times. He ended with this amazing observation, which was great. She moved from living legend to legend. And for the rest of that golf tournament, every time I'd see him, he would have a drink in his hand or a cigar in his hand, and it would always be like, here's to the legend. And there were some tears, there were some high fives, but there were a lot of random people celebrating Debbie then. So Michael asked me to keep my speech to 5 to 7 minutes, and I'm going to borrow a few from Cindy's abbreviated speech. Thank you very much. Michael asked me to focus mainly on anecdotes from the lifelong friendship that Debbie and I had. Since I blindly do anything that any member of the Davies family tells me to do, I'm going to do just that, and I'm going to spend the rest of my speech talking about my best buddy. My best buddy. There we go. I remember like it was yesterday when she sent me this text, when she told me that she was cancer-free. I felt like it was one of those moments where you get a second chance to have a relationship. So I made her the following offer. We're not working again, are we? Okay. So here's the offer. I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go celebrate big. Anywhere on earth that you want to go, I'm going to take you. And we're going to go together, and it's going to be great. We're going to go for a whole week. And so she was like, I don't even know how to process that offer. I said, here's a couple of ideas. We can go to Paris, we can go to Hawaii, we can go to London, whatever you want to do. She was like, oh my God, I've never been to any of those places, so this is going to be great. She said, let me think about it. The next day she calls. Those of you that know her well will know that this was the only answer she could give. It was a boring, super boring, yet kind of awesome answer, which was, she told me, and again, this is a quote. She said, I'm so proud of you and what you've become. I would like to spend the week with you and your family and get to know your children. So we had a totally fabulous We had a totally fabulous time touring the Bay Area, did the standard Bay Area tourist stuff, and then this culminated in a Golden State Warriors basketball game. Okay. She admitted very clearly that she had never gone to an NBA game before and wasn't particularly interested in going to one. But since it was something that was important to me, she would go and it'd be kind of cool. When we arrived at the arena, she realized we had some pretty good seats. So we were on the floor right next to all the players, and she said, "Okay, Gideon, which one is Steph Curry?" And I'm like, "He's standing right behind you, about to shoot a basketball." And she's like, "Get a picture of me with him. Get a picture of me with him." So I got a picture. And she's like, "I'm going to send this to the grandkids. Michael and Trevor are going to be so excited." So she was texting everybody, and Michael was texting me back and saying all kind of fun stuff. And by the way, for someone who did not much care for basketball, I went back and I counted. She sent me probably 100 texts over the next 3 years about all things Steph Curry. Anytime he had an injury, a good game, whatever. That's just the way it goes. Anyway, so next slide. Anybody that knows Debbie knows that she has a love-hate relationship with her cats, especially Toby there. Next slide. So during the pandemic, I won't insult you by reading these texts for you. I'll let you read them yourselves. So during the pandemic, I was telling her that the kids were having a particularly hard time, and Susie was having a hard time. We were all having a hard time. So she's like, "I got a great idea for you." So she sends me all these random great ideas, and this one was the funniest one because I told her, I'm like, Susie's, we already got 2 dogs, and we had 2 cats before. I'm not sure she's going to be up for it. And then, sure enough, before I had a chance to even talk to the boss over there, she backtracked immediately, which was great. The next text really cracked me up. She sent this over to me, and it came totally out of the blue. I was in a serious meeting, and buzz and look at it like, oh my God. And these people on this Zoom were like, "What's he smiling at?" That's what I was smiling at. Okay, I asked her for her permission ahead of time, so I'm not going to be calling her out while she's not prepared for this. But I want you guys to know that in preparing for today, I went back and I read the 3,000 to 4,000 texts. At some point, as you guys all know, that they're her friends, she discovered texting, and when she did, it was just a torrent. I mean, it's asynchronous. You don't have to call anymore. You can just text, and people will get it. And so there were about 3,000 or 4,000 texts that I went back and I read all of them just to find some nuggets for you guys. And other than bragging about our grandchildren, and of course Michael and Trevor, there's one name that stands out as Debbie's true best friend. So I'm going to give the BFF award to Sandy McSeveny. Right there. You'll be happy to know that when I looked and I counted, I did a little search on my texts, she came up 50 plus times. I lost count after 50 times. So I had to hear about all your comings and goings and all your fun times and sad times and such. Here's what I want you to know, Sandy. Debbie was my buddy, but you were her best friend. Bravo to you for that. All right, so if anybody needs an encapsulation of why Debbie is a legendary teacher, here it is. Where's Oscar? There you are, buddy. She never stops questioning, never stops learning, never stops sharing. Can everybody see the 2 shadows? There's 2 shadows, right? One is light, one is strong. And she sent me that text. I don't know where. It wasn't anything particular, and I think I was in my late 40s when she sent this over to me. And when I came up with what I thought was the answer, she's a teacher, so I sent it back to her, and I said, "Is this right?" And she said, "I don't know. That's why I sent it over to you." What do you think? And she had her idea, I had my idea, and then we went over to Google and we checked, and by the way, we were both wrong, which was, if anybody wants to know, come up to me afterwards. It's actually a really cool explanation. I waited with bated breath every couple of months for the health updates. We celebrated every piece of good news together. Maybe had a drink, you know, maybe had a high five, maybe talked about it a little bit. And these are just a couple of the ones that I kind of pulled out of the text archive. And I want to point everybody to the back to the Steph Curry comment. To the best one is that she said up there that my health is now better than the Warriors, which was great, which was true. So to conclude today, I like I said only had 5 to 7 minutes, so I'm trying to go fast. I want to show you guys all a side of the legend that not many are lucky enough to see, but I figured it'd be fun. I hope it's okay. There are a couple of bad words here, but I'm going to start with my favorite Debbie typo. So, this is straight up true. Does this have anything to do with what you were saying earlier? No. Ask. No, different. Yeah, okay, yeah. For whatever it's worth, I was suggesting that you go to the App Store and get Uber. You can't make this up. This has to be true, right? Next slide. My favorite admission of guilt by her. I think she just finally felt really guilty, and so she had to tell somebody, so she told me. Maybe, Sandy, you know too, that she just was sneaking out, and I called her, and I'm like, you can't do that. And she was all mad at me for saying that. Okay, my final slide. So she occasionally got very grumpy with me when I would get effusive and tell her how much I loved her, how much I cared about her, and how much she means to me. Of course, once we became kind of good buddies, if it kind of pissed her off a little bit, then I would just kind of needle her with it a little bit. And this was the funniest exchange where my at the time I think 7-year-old daughter had just sent me the love rabbit, so I forwarded it over to her. And then, like, I'm not even joking. Like within I don't know how she typed it this fast. Within a second, this came back, and okay, I'm gonna get through this last sentence here. So, to answer your question, Debbie, the rabbit will never stop bouncing. I'm never going to stop saying I love you. Thank you for letting me share today.
I'm not scheduled to speak, but I just wanted to say that I love it, Debbie. I learned a lot from her, and this is my small payment on a great debt.
Gideon, I'm big into preparing too for speaking. I love public speaking, but despite my notes, I'm totally unprepared to do this, I think. But I do have a few comments on some of your other speeches that I was thinking about in there. I mean, I'll tell you what, the bowling club, that was utterly confusing for like a 7-year-old. What are they doing? They laugh all the time, and why are you called the bowling club? I remember asking my mom that over and over again, and why do we still have this bowling pin on our Christmas tree decades later? And Cindy, we should have compared notes, because some of those anecdotes are ones that you might hear again here. And Vince, that personnel file, I mean, part of me was like, my mom's about to storm back in here, and like, in anger, like, I can't believe those assholes made me write down my weight, but it's unbelievable. And Gideon, don't worry, Toby's in the car. I've got the cat ready for you to take home, so we're all good. It really has been remarkable to hear so many anecdotes about my mother today, last night with a lot of you, and over the course of the last couple of months. She truly was a remarkable person. Whether she was your teacher, your friend, your family, she had a huge impact on so many people. It's been pretty overwhelming, the number of messages that Michael and I have received over the last couple of months. Handwritten notes, texts, everything have poured in about our remarkable mother. And a lot of those stories are just fantastic, and they just cut to, what she was. And last night, a few of us were standing around the fire, and one of our neighbors, his name is Brandon, who was, our age growing up, a neighborhood boy. He shared a story. He actually texted it to Michael and I about a month ago, and we were talking about it last night, and I thought I would share that story here too for you all. But Brandon, in this text, he vividly described a hot summer day back around probably 1980 when my mother took us all to the swimming pool, Seven Hills. Usually, actually, they would just drop us off, and we'd be there just raising hell for about 10 hours, and then they would pick us up around dinner time. But that day, she stayed, and she was a lifeguard way back in high school. I don't know if that was on the personnel file there. But, she was probably a little, upset to see some of our swimming strokes out there. And Brandon said she called him over and another neighborhood kid who happens to be sitting right there, Dan, and offered an ice cream cone at Baskin-Robbins if they could swim the length of the pool. So Dan dove right in and swam to the other end, 25 yards down there, which seemed like a huge pool. Made it to the other end, and we were all excited for him. Congrats, Dan. Well done. But Brandon jumped in, and he was struggling. He was working really hard. I mean, he was a little kid, and got about halfway down and reached out and grabbed the side and held on, and he couldn't do it. So at the end of the day, as Brandon wrote, quote, "On the drive home, she paraded us all into Baskin-Robbins, with me believing that she'd give me a good effort cone." All caps, he writes, "Nope." Brandon continued on, quote, she only bought Dan ice cream. I started crying, thinking she might slip up and throw me a sympathy cone. All caps again, "Nope." She looked at me and said, "Only if you can swim a lap." God, man, she was a piece of work. Brandon continues writing, the next time we went back to Seven Hills, I swam that lap. It was my first lesson on working hard and never giving up, even if you feel like you're drowning. After that, when your mom spoke, I listened. Much respect for your mom. Brandon then concluded, all of that whole day, that got me through some tough days in the Marine Corps. Brandon went on to be a drill sergeant at Parris Island for many, many years. She really, really was a piece of work, my mom. Well, not all of us became Marines under her careful tutelage. We all had our own moments where her high standards, her resolute toughness, her power pulled something out of you that you didn't think you had. It was pretty unbelievable. And I think you were probably being generous on the allocation of percents about how much was encouragement versus advice at that point. But she really made sure that you did it yourself, and she wouldn't do it for you. You were ultimately responsible. And you left twice as strong as a result. As Cindy mentioned before, the quote, the E.M. Forster quote that she loved, spoon feeding in the long run teaches us nothing but the shape of the spoon. I mean, she really, really did live that mantra. It was stunning how many messages from former students that Michael and I have gotten who said their proudest moment as a student was some B+ on a pre-calc exam, a hard-fought moment. When she said, you were ice cream worthy, it tasted good. Still, it'd be far, far off to portray my mother as simply some tough teacher with high expectations. She was clearly that, but she also combined that with a love and a dedication to her students that was just stunning. Letter after letter that we received, that I've read from former students and colleagues, detailed how she touched their lives, whether it was reteaching a unit in the middle of the night on the phone, which happened regularly. Like, we would wake up and she'd be like on the phone in the kitchen discussing, some calculus topic. Or just that giddy excitement that Gideon was referring to when she was so just touched by your little moments of triumph when you were struggling through something difficult. Or her getting down on her knees patiently to explain some concept right next to a kid at their desk. And how she helped so many students across so many decades through their moments of personal pain in their life, far, far beyond math. There's just so much care and generosity and love in my mom. In her way, the way I think about it, and I'm a math teacher now as well, that's not by accident, but her gift as a teacher and as a mom was constantly living in between those two places. That toughness on one end, that steeliness, but also that care, that love on the other. And in between those two ends, in between those two poles, was learning and growth for all of us who were just lucky enough to be there with her. She was remarkable. To conclude, though, as someone who got to watch her up close, and as I said, as a math teacher now, the thing that I've been the most dumbfounded about our incredible mom over the years was just her capacity to work hard. She really was a beast. I mean, people often laugh and when I describe how she went on strike from all housework in the 80s out of, a real sense of equality in our household, that it was our father's turn to really step up and carry that weight. But let's be clear, she wasn't sitting around eating bonbons or Cheez-Its or whatnot with that extra time. She was perched at the dining room table, surrounded by stacks of papers to grade, notes she wrote to students, open textbooks strewn about, and detailed lesson plans, all covered with little tiny yellow Post-it notes and her careful script and mechanical pencil. Hours upon hours upon hours of work. And that, as much as any mathematical skill or interpersonal teaching genius that she clearly had, that work, that's why she was so impactful. Her dedication was just mind-boggling. I mean, despite it clearly being my destiny to be a math teacher from an early age, I was scared to death of becoming a teacher because I got to watch that up close. And it took me a number of years to get into it, to do it, to make that jump. And as all of my colleagues who are teachers in the audience, I'm sure can relate, at the end of the week, I'm just done, like really done. My mom, she'd wake up on Saturday, take a break from grading, and just write textbook chapters. It was insane. It was it's just mind-boggling. But I don't think I'll ever forget what she looked like in that spot in the dining room. That place, that was her temple. Simply put, my mom cared so deeply. Yes, about math, but more about the people around her, her dear students, her colleagues, her longtime friends, and her family. Mom, thank you. In awe and with love, congratulations on a life well lived.
My brother proves to be a tough act to follow. I'm Michael, Debbie's other son, and I wanted to just start by saying a few thank yous. I want to first thank Vince and the whole USN community. I can't tell you how much Vince has done as a part of this service, but also just for my mom in her kind of the twilight of her career here. She had a 40-year love affair with this school. And she gave a lot to this school, but the school actually gave so much to her. And, the humanity of it all and the relationships of it all, it's really overwhelming. And I want to say thank you to the USN community. I also wanted to thank my mom's doctors, Craig Sussman and Marta Crispins in particular. Thank you guys for all the care. I know my mom tried to pay you back with shortbread cookies over the years, but I wanted to say an extra thank you now. I don't know if anyone ate all that shortbread, but she got a lot at Costco, that's the way she rolled. I also want to say thank you to my mom's many friends. I mean, Trevor and I have talked about this many times, but it's amazing to think that my mom lived for 27 years here in Nashville as a widow after my dad passed. And, a lot of that was her own independent resilience, but a lot of that was the love of family and friends. People like Sandy and the Gilmores, John and Judy, Lee and Carol, my aunt and uncle, who camped out in her driveway for 3 months to help her through her first cancer treatments. Thank you. And thank you to all the speakers. I think you could hear all the love from those folks. It's truly remarkable, and a lot has been said about my mom, as a math teacher, as a colleague, as a mentor. And I knew that was going to all happen, so I just wanted to say a few words about what it was like, what she was like as a mother. And Trevor and I have that unique perspective. Because Mom truly was, in a lot of ways, has been said, a force of nature. Most of the time for the greater good, but every once in a while, the force of her personality could ever so slightly misfire against other forces in the universe and create pretty memorable reactions, especially for her children. And this happened quite a few times in the early years, in the 70s and 80s, as my Connecticut-born and bred mother interacted with 1970s Tennessee, sometimes the intersections created some interesting reactions. I'll remember a few. I remember our street, greatest street in the world, Cantrell Avenue, to grow up on, where we used to, all the neighbors, 20-something kids on the block, and all the neighbors would go around and look at each other's Christmas decorations. And here we were, fresh from Connecticut via New Jersey, and my mother, instead of having a Christmas tree, had decided that what we should have was just a dead branch decorated with Peruvian ornaments. At the time, Trevor and I liked to think that it was a kind of early show of environmentalism. The more I got to know, realized it was really just frugality. But the look on our neighbors' faces as they came around and saw our Peruvian Christmas tree, I'm telling you, I mean, like Charlie Brown's Christmas tree, I never got that. I never understood why his Christmas tree was pitiful, because it was so much better than the one that I had as a child. It took years of explaining before I could understand that episode. My mother also, I went to Woodmont Elementary as a youngster. It was before my mom even started teaching here in 1978. And at that time, before, as my brother noted, my mom went on strike, she was packing our lunches. My mom purchased for me, I was very proud of this, a Planet of the Apes lunchbox as a kindergartner. But other kids got a new lunchbox every year. I never got a new lunchbox. Okay, I had that Planet of the Apes lunchbox until I went to middle school. This was even after one day my mother was multitasking and she had put on a burner to have the tea kettle going, and she'd accidentally turned on the burner underneath my Planet of the Apes lunchbox. So my Planet of the Apes lunchbox on the electric range had a big spiral circle on it. And I said, "Mom, now maybe, can I please get a new lunchbox?" Nope. No new lunchbox. I had to carry that thing kind of against my leg, the burner side. And Mom, I was the first kid to start brown bagging it. That wasn't a coincidence. It was the Planet of the Apes lunchbox. But this all led to, the Planet of the Apes lunchbox also had a Planet of the Apes thermos. And my mother loved to pack things in that thermos. Again, weren't necessarily the traditional dietary things of kids in the South in 1970. One time, the cafeteria at Woodmont flooded, and our whole class was sitting cross-legged in the tiny little library, which is like the size of a bedroom, at Woodmont Elementary. And I opened my Planet of the Apes thermos, anxious to see what was inside. And Mom didn't have a lot of time, hadn't gone to the grocery store, had packed a tin of sardines. I opened that thing up, and the whole room immediately filled with a scent of sardines. I immediately closed the Planet of the Apes lunchbox in shame. No lunch for Michael that day. There was also the time we used to drive a lot to my grandparents lived in western North Carolina, and we used to go there a lot. And my parents decided we'd had a little too much fast food. Trevor had memorized kind of the signs in the bathroom and the Wendy's at exit 347, and they decided at that point that maybe we should start eating a little more healthily. Well, there weren't a lot of options around Crossville at that time, but they heard Shoney's had a salad bar, and so we started stopping at Shoney's. So we roll into this Shoney's in Crossville, and my mom cranes around in the booth, and she looks around. She forgets that she's not in the classroom, and the teacher voice just pops out, and she goes, "Why is everyone in here so fat?" And my father just crawled underneath the booth. I mean, sometimes there were challenges being her son. But most of the time, her good intentions did in fact successfully hit their target, and the results, as have been noted here, could really truly be magical. We know she did this as a teacher. She had a sixth sense about what people needed, whether it was extra encouragement or a kick in the rear. I was her student, and I needed the kick in the rear. and I was kind of goofing off in her Algebra 2 accelerated class. And I'll never forget, at that time we got these, I don't know if they still give them at university school, but progress reports. If you were doing poorly or if you're doing really well, I only knew it to be doing poorly, but you would get one of these progress reports sent home midterm. And I will never forget my mom presenting me with this letter. It was addressed to the parents of Michael Davies. I opened it up and it was a letter from Mom. Progress report. And these things were very serious. They had carbons and they were, in triplicate and all this stuff. And she proceeded to eviscerate me in this progress report, all addressed to my parents. And I said, Mom, is this a joke? She said, does it look like a joke? And I don't know if it was that or something else, but I did start to shape up that year and started taking things a little bit more seriously. I also laughed when I got to college. A couple of the things that I'd watched all this, what it meant to be a teacher through my mom's eyes, and the expectations I had of almost my college professors were somewhat warped by my mom's own interactions. I mean, we had one phone line. My parents would never spring for two. We had one phone line, and my mom would be on it all the time. You'd pick up the phone, and she'd still be talking to Joey about his, trigonometry project. The phone was hers. She talked to students all the time, and parents all the time at home. So I remember when I got to college, I had some question for a professor, and I called the guy at home. And this is somewhat irregular. And I had no idea. I thought this was what teachers did. My mom took calls all the time. My mother also, as a freshman, when I was a freshman at Swarthmore, she sent up a case of jam and said, you need to deliver each one of these to each of your professors. And I remember I went to this one guy. He was near retirement. I think he'd been teaching at the school for over 50 years, and I handed him proudly a jam that my mother had made, and the look on his face, I realized immediately that this was a great error. Nobody presented the venerable professor with jam. He took it, but I realized that I took the rest of the jam and gave it to the cleaning crew. I realized it was not a great idea, but this is what my mom had taught me. And this is what, I learned were the kind of personal touches that you did and that you gave your students, and part of the reason why she was such a special teacher, I think. But besides her influence as a teacher, I think that my mom also had really a magical presence as a friend and as a colleague. She was a force of nature. I mean, she was an ardent feminist. She fought when she was pregnant for me for maternity leave with the Connecticut Education Association. When I went and found in my baby book, it was a letter from the lawyer saying, we think you're good. We think you got your maternity leave. I said, Mom, what is this? She said, oh, well, yeah, I had to threaten to sue. It was just what she did. She was before her time. She was loyal to her friends. She was inclusive before any of other people talked about being inclusive. My mom had many friends who were gay or lesbian, who she held close, people who were different that my mom brought in and held close because she really felt that it was her. I think, she had a sixth sense about what she could give and what she could, bring other people together. It was something she just always did. I can't tell you also about the empathy that she had for other people who were going through illnesses, informed a lot by her own experience taking care of my father. I was home with my mom the year in 1994 when she took care of my dad at home, and I saw how she took care of him. He had a brain tumor. A brain tumor is a nasty, nasty thing, and my mom cared for my dad with such grace and such caring. He was the love of her life, and she cared for him. She was truly an example, and she faced, a lot of challenges because of the stress of that. She had mental health challenges after that. She had stress-related conditions related to that. It was very hard for her, but the grace that she showed doing that has truly been an inspiration to me and to my brother. And my brother took very good care of my mom in the last few months of her life. I'm very indebted to my brother for that. But he had a good teacher, a very good teacher. She loved her grandchildren. She loved you guys, all of you. You're all very different, and she loved you. She also loved her menagerie of cats, who now live with my brother and Whitney. God bless them. Gideon, you may be off the hook. You may not be off the hook. But, you know, for all these reasons, I just wanted to share what was most important for me. I got to be with my mom the day before she died, and I got to talk to her a lot. And what was most important for me to tell her was that I was proud of her. I was so very proud of her and how fortunate I was to be her son, and Trevor was to be her son. I really couldn't be prouder of anyone, and I'm still in awe of my mom, and we miss her. We miss her very deeply, but I'm so proud to have gotten to be her son. So thank you guys very much. Oh, I also wanted to say, it was my responsibility. I know we've run long and we're already 10 minutes over, but I did want to throw it open. If anyone else would like to share any remembrances of my mother, one of the fun things about is hearing stories that we've never heard before, and some of them are just hilarious. But if we could take a couple minutes, if there's anybody who has anything to share, I'd love to hear it. And then I think Stacy Rector will say a closing prayer, and Vince will have some closing words. But thank you all.
I'm Sandy McSeveny son, Dan, and I had the privilege of knowing Debbie essentially all of my life. Debbie and Keith were my parents' best friends, and I grew up with Michael and Trevor just around the block. I think some of my favorite childhood memories were of holiday meals together. We did, I can't count how many Christmases and Thanksgivings together. Nobody mentioned Debbie's cooking today, but she really was pretty fabulous. Memories of the holidays for me are sort of this chaotic scene of just messes in both kitchens, in both houses, and the two moms on the phone back and forth, sending one of us boys back to the grocery store back and forth with some ingredient that somebody had forgotten. But somehow it all came together at the end, and we had these just wonderful meals together, and all the way into adulthood, into college. We've shared those. I'm really grateful for those. Debbie filled a lot of roles in my life. She was a second mom to me. She was my math teacher for a couple years. She was my advisor in high school. She was my mentor at a whole bunch of different stages. And finally, as an adult, she was my friend. As we all know, Debbie was a woman of very strong opinions, and she was not afraid to share them with you. It's those convictions, though, and the loyalty to her friends that we've heard about today. Those were kind of what combined to make her such a good advocate for her students and for math education as a whole. I mean, she really had not just a local impact, but a national impact from the work that she did. I think most important to me, though, and her gift to all of us who had her as a teacher and a mentor, was her ability to relate to teenagers, not just as a teacher, but on a personal level. She was not afraid to tell me when I was being a dumbass, and she mentored so many kids coming through USN into adulthood. So for all those things, I'm so grateful to have had Debbie in my life.
Hi, I'm Catherine, Debbie's oldest and best. Sorry. Hey, geez. Okay. Hi, I'm Catherine, Debbie's oldest and best grandchild. So my grandmother used to take me out on expeditions, especially when I would come to her house for granny camp in the summer. And while it may sound really exciting, a lot of these trips were strange errands and doing a lot of odd chores. But the thing was that my grandmother was a very odd and unique woman, and she was well loved because she was so selfless and kind without limits. Sorry. But she always had this strict undertone that made me get busy. There was a lot of fun expeditions, like trips to Costco or the cat store. Lots of trips to go get ginger ice cream or to go pick up Jell-O. Others were less enjoyable, like going to cut flowers for the kitchen or pick up sticks in a neighbor's lawn, or doing math problems at the kitchen counter. Or the one that I most remember, bagging Cheez-Its at the kitchen counter for Vanderbilt parking staff. Some of these chores were things that I would whine about doing, but now continue to be the fondest memories of my childhood. And of course, this translated to when my grandmother found FaceTime. My class was on a group FaceTime right before the night of a big test in our class. And everyone was so confused. We were all poring over our textbook and our notes, and no one knew what to do because none of us knew how to do any of the problems. And I said, let me add my grandmother to the FaceTime. And so my best friend, Victoria, is on the phone. She goes, are you sure we should add her to the FaceTime? I go, oh, yeah, this is a good idea. So we add my grandmother to the FaceTime, and she sits on the phone with us for an hour, teaching us how to do everything. And by the end, everyone is fine. Everyone knows what we're doing. But the first moment that I added her to the call, she said, what page are we on? And I said, do you have the textbook, or do you need me to send you pictures of it? And she said, no, I have all the textbooks in the back. Granny took the time to go through each of my classmates and teach them how to do the things they were struggling to do. And that was just the type of person that she was. My grandmother taught me a lot of things, but the thing that I like to remember the most is that you can have fun doing almost anything if you have a good attitude. I've learned that life is an expedition. There's things that we want to do and things we don't want to do. But if we go in with the loving and caring presence that my grandmother had, we can not only carry on her legacy, but make the world a better place. Thank you.
It's a wonderful afternoon, isn't it? I'm Craig Sussman. I was Debbie's doctor for many, many years and friend. I just want to tell a quick story. You know, how does one force of nature take care of another force of nature? But I remember Sandy and I and Michael and Trevor and I had been talking many times about the fact that we knew that Debbie could not take care of herself any longer. No matter what we all did, it wasn't going to work. We knew that she had to move east. And I practiced, and I thought about it, and I rehearsed what I was going to say to convince her that she had to move. I sat down with her, and I was all prepared, and I said, Debbie, you have to move either to Charlottesville or Washington, and I'm ready for her usual backlash response to my force of nature. And she looked at me and she said, I would love to do that. She said, I would love to be able to spend my last days close to my boys and their families and my grandchildren and their wives. And it meant so much. And of course, it made me feel like, boy, that was easy. But she was truly a force of nature and a wonderful friend to all of us. And we will miss her.
Good afternoon. I'm Pam Thompson. I want you to know, Trevor, Michael, everybody, Debbie truly was a force of nature. She was a people person. In the late 70s, when I was the only person of color for 12 years, Debbie helped me to stay sane here. She helped me with my struggles. And it was hard. It was very, very hard. She helped me when I was faculty advisor. We brought to university school the first diversity training. And it was hard. We had a struggle with the headmaster. We had a struggle with a lot of people, but we brought diversity training. Debbie was instrumental in doing that. I was instrumental in doing that as faculty advisor. Janet, you remember that. Many of you remember that. But it was great. Debbie was supportive of me during that whole entire time, and I love her for it. She was a great teacher to my 3 daughters, and I appreciate that. So I just want to let you guys know how much I love and appreciate Debbie. Thank you all very, very much. She's a very special person. Thank you.
I am Debbie's brother next down. I just wanted to, well, of course I loved her. I was thinking about the first time when she went to go to college. She was going down to Goucher, and that was heckin' gone from where we were in Connecticut. And the folks are at the down at the beach, and Debbie and I are at home, and she has to go to school. Well, of course, I had worked on my father's car and on the brakes, and therefore they didn't work. And she said, well, we're going to go there, and we haven't got another car. Does the emergency brake work? Well, yeah, it's got cables. It hasn't got anything I messed with. So I got off, we went. And we're zooming down, and finally she says, you're tired, and, you know, it's my time to drive. So we got going down the road, straight through the toll booth we went. I'm watching the toll booth go by on both sides, you know, and I said, Debbie, she finally gets a brake up, you know. Here we are, stopped, dead in the middle of the road. These cars are going, I'm like, Debbie, you can't stop here. Well, we ought to go back and pay. Debbie, just keep going, please, you know. And I'm begging her, and I'm 2 years younger, you know, and whatever. Well, how long do you think it'll take us to back up to the thing? And she gets into gear ratios and, oh, really? Well, if you know so much, you drive. Here we are, doors wide open, cars going past, and we're switching drivers at the toll gate, waiting for the cops to come get us. That was the first time I ever took her to school. Well,
she went to college to Goucher, came home, and she went to go to her first employment, if you will. And she was going to teach down in Winston-Salem, all-black school. I went to we all went to basically an all-white school. This was the 60s. Winston-Salem was not a place, that we were used to going to, had never been there. So anyhow, she's got her suitcase and stuff, and off we go. I drive her, this time we had brakes. And I drove her down to school, and we drove through some ghettos, and then we drove up to this school, and there are people everywhere. It hasn't got anything to do with us. We just pulled up in front of the beginning of the school. And I'm thinking, geez, Debbie, you really want to teach here? Are you sure? Are you really sure? She says, well, you know how high Debbie was. She looked up at me and she says, well, buck up. I dropped her off, and that was Debbie.
My name is Stacy Rector, and I was privileged to serve as one of Debbie's pastors at Second Presbyterian Church for 9 years. And truly, it was a privilege to share that time with her, and a joy for me. She kept me on my toes, as she kept everyone on their toes, it sounds like here. And she was, I think, grandmothers are very special people, and yours was a very special person too. Let us pray. Eternal God, we thank you for the great company of all those who have kept the faith, who have finished the race, and who now rest from their labors. We praise you for those dear to us, whom we name in our hearts before you now. Especially, we thank you for Debbie, for the gift of her life, for her commitment to teaching, for the impact she had on so many, and for the love that she received from you and that she gave to us. Love which remains with us even now. Thank you that you have received Debbie into your presence and your everlasting peace. God of hope, help us to believe where we have not seen, trusting you to lead us through our years, and help us to live as those who are prepared to die. So when our days are ended, you enable us to die as those who go forth to live, so that living or dying, our life may be in you and your infinite love. Thanks be to you, O God. Amen.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you for joining our little secular congregation today. We're quite a bunch. Thank all of you. This is a veritable who's who in the USN community, and it's been a pretty deep little stretch of time. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Gideon, for letting us cry beside you for a little bit and smile at the appropriate times. Thank you, Fitz, Dr. Fitzpatrick, little Chopin, never hurt anybody. Boys, you done well. It was a little rocky in the spring and early summer, what you did in bringing your mom home with you was one of the best object lessons that anybody who's paying attention could ever have aimed their way. And as we close, I want to take you on a little bit of a thought exercise. Because the fact of the matter is, in 1970, Debbie Davis was teaching at a school right next to a university. She was at E.O. Smith up in Storrs, Connecticut. She could have stayed. Just imagine, those of us Nashvillians, imagine if she did. If she hadn't rolled in here 44 years ago. And if you're like me, you can't. I just cannot imagine not knowing Debbie. I can't imagine USN without Debbie. You know, our students, our faculty, our culture without her. Fortunately, carrying the legend status that she does, she left us, if we would just stop and think about it, she left us a pretty good instruction book. And now, it's our turn to put those lessons to work. As we walk out, there are 3 things I'm reasonably sure are absolutely true. Catherine, one thing is that she would have absolutely been gobbling up what you said. That was strong. The second thing is she would entirely approve of everything that happened here today. Am I right? I mean, I am dead certain on this one. You know, it reflected so much of who she is. And then the last thing is that she would not want us to rush out those doors and go our separate ways. We do have a modicum of refreshments to offer out in the hallway. And as one of my little tributes, I'm not going to rush out of here. Right? I want to stop and connect with people. To you folks across planet Earth, wheresoever you may be, we're glad you joined us. For the who's who in the room, you know why you're here. Time well spent. But we have work to do. So let's close together, spend a little time reflecting, and get right back to it. Thank you, everybody.